Hi, everyone. It is Wednesday, June 3rd, 2026, and this is a video I should have recorded a long time ago. But anyway, we're recording it today. And um, the topic of this video is why did I become an acupuncturist, or what got me interested in acupuncture? So I'm going to tell you a short answer. And then if you just need a short answer, you can quit watching the video. And if you want a longer answer, I'd recommend that you keep watching the video. And I might say a couple swear words. Fair warning. Um, the reason that I got into acupuncture is because I was having health problems and I tried it and it made me feel better. So that's the short answer. Um, the long answer is honestly quite long and a little bit convoluted, but here we go. Um, okay, so 2026. I'm going to take us back approximately 30 years. I'm guessing this was around 1996, maybe 1997. Um, and I was in high school, and the high school I went to was called Realms of Inquiry. And some Realms people might watch this video, and maybe they could even discuss their memory of the event I'm about to share. Um, but anyway, it was a very small school, and it was a private school. And we would sometimes go on trips. And the trips were usually not fancy. In fact, they were like camping and backpacking, which, I mean, honestly, aren't my favorite things at this point in my life. I like glamping. But anyway, I like having a bathroom. So, and you're going to find out why when I tell you this video. Um, so you can picture this. I was in Costa Rica with, let's say, 20 other students and maybe 3 teachers or chaperones. And it was a beautiful trip. I highly recommend Costa Rica. We went to Volcan Arenal, a volcano there. And while we were in that town, I got sick, just meaning fever, diarrhea, probably what people would call like traveler's diarrhea. Or I picked up some sort of bug. Um, it wasn't ideal, but luckily we weren't camping there. We were staying at a place that did have a bathroom. And I remember maybe walking to the local store and taking some Pepto-Bismol. Also, I should back up a little bit and say, prior to going on that trip, we, I think we were instructed to do all the things that like the Salt Lake Travel Clinic would recommend. So I probably had to take something to prevent malaria. I don't know if it was that trip or another trip. I think I had to take something to prevent typhoid. I don't know. Um, so we were trying to mitigate our risk of picking up things. But anyway, I got sick while I was there. And something else happened on that trip, which I think also accounts for part of the problems that I would end up having. And we were in Parque Nacional Corcovado. And anyway, we were backpacking there. We were going to hike from like one ranger station to the next. And we were hiking along the beach. That's the Pacific side of Costa Rica. It's gorgeous. And okay, this is where it gets weird. So at some point, there was a river that we were going to have to cross, and we were going to do it at a specific time of day when the tide was low so that we could like get through it easily and so that like sharks wouldn't be in the water. But anyway, what ended up happening before that is our group got attacked by killer bees. And I know this is like, you're like, okay, lady. Um, there were killer bees in that area, um, unbeknownst to myself. And one thing about killer bees is they're very territorial. So 20 kids hiking isn't like 20 kids all in a group together. It's like maybe, 7 or 8 kids, 7 or 8 kids, 7 or 8 kids, kind of like fast, medium, and slow. I would say I was in the medium group. So some of the kids that were ahead of us got attacked by killer bees, and they ran back to tell us, like, there's killer bees up ahead. So we kind of like stayed there for a minute and went up into, I guess, I don't know. We just stayed back for a minute. Let's say that. And for whatever reason, we the plan that we made was that we were just going to try to run past the bees, okay, which was a stupid idea. And um, long story short, we didn't run past the bees. The bees got us. And luckily for myself, I didn't get stung very much. I had at that time longer hair than this, but I remember it being in like pigtail braids. I was wearing a bucket hat, and I remember the bees kind of getting up into my hair. That was disconcerting to say the least. And like, okay, so one of my teachers also did this, but we thought that maybe jumping into the ocean would be a way to get the bees away from us. So that particular teacher jumped in and hit his head on a rock. I got into the ocean and I was wearing my entire backpack, which is gigantic. Um, and luckily another student saved me, if you will, because he'll never let this die. His name is John Hamilton. But anyway, so I didn't get stung very much. A lot of students didn't get stung very much. One of the students, her name's Jocelyn, she got stung like 250 times. We had to have like an airplane fly into that ranger station, like the guard station, and take her back to San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica. But so, okay, to say the least, now that I'm talking about that story that sounds very traumatic, what happened that night is we waded through the shark-infested waters and set up camp at the ranger station. And it was like the worst night of my life because I didn't even like camping back then. Um, but the next day at the ranger station, one thing that I thought was exciting is they had Coca-Cola there for sale. So I bought Coca-Cola and I drank it, and I immediately had to run to the bathroom with diarrhea. So by that point, either the damage was done for me being like getting sick in Costa Rica, or the damage was done just from me having a traumatic experience and my body was like, F this. So, okay, we're going to skip ahead like months or even years. And we're going to talk about my childhood a little bit, meaning I grew up in Kaysville, Utah, which is now like a very nice and kind of up and coming area. But back then it was a very rural area. I lived in West Kaysville. Um, and I would always go out and do things. I would ride my bike, miles away. I would go for runs. I would go rollerblading. I would, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. Go exploring. And what would happen is after I got back from that Costa Rica trip, I would go out to do something and I would be away from my house and I'd be like, I'm gonna shit my pants. There we said it. And like that's really no way to live. That's not fun. So at some point, sorry, I'm gonna take a little coffee break. At some point, I did what I think most people do, which is try Western medicine first, right? Isn't that what most people think of? I am sick. I'm going to go to the doctor. So I think at that point I was still a teenager. Even if I was 18 by then, I don't know, maybe I was 17. it doesn't really matter. I was either still in high school or I went to undergrad at Westminster, so maybe I was at Westminster. Um, but my mom took me to like the either the travel clinic again or like the infectious disease clinic at the University of Utah. And they were like, oh, sure, like, let's give you a course of antibiotics. Let's give you a course of antifungals. Maybe you picked up a parasite, that kind of stuff. But I wasn't getting better. And um, at some point, it became very frustrating because, like, how many antibiotics can a person take, especially strong ones like Cipro? Um, how many antifungals can a person take? How many blah, blah, blah. So at some point, I had a colonoscopy, which was also a traumatic experience. So we're kind of like adding insult to injury at this point. But that's why I said this is a long video, and maybe you don't want to hear all of this information, but it really paints a picture of like how I got into acupuncture and who I am today. So the reason the colonoscopy was traumatic is because I was under local anesthesia, but I kind of woke up during it. And the doctor who was doing it, his dad had died like that same day. They came in to say, like, oh, he finally passed. So that was traumatic. Anyway, on that colonoscopy, they found I had colitis, which is inflammation of the colon. And again, this was 30 years ago. So I think that some things in Western medicine are coming a long way, but I feel like if you have inflammation in your colon, let's think of some things we can do with your diet to get that under control, right? Let's do an anti-inflammatory diet. Let's take a probiotic. But that wasn't the type of health advice I was getting at that time. And because I wasn't being able to do the active, like exercise activities that I was used to, I was getting depressed. And I was just kind of like gaining weight. And I wasn't eating healthy. I was eating a ton of Ben and Jerry's Chubby Hubby ice cream. It was great. But so at some point, again, this was all the Western medicine protocol. They were like, well, since your daughter's just depressed now or like having anxiety that she's gonna like poop her pants everywhere, let's put her on something. And I remember taking Paxil, and my mom noticed that it was making me act weird. I don't really have like a ton of memory of that, but I feel like my mom would know because I grew up with her, like if I were to be acting weird. So we were going to stop the Paxil, and then I think they wanted me to take Elavil. I don't know, amitriptyline. I think that's the right drug, but I'm not sure. And I feel like at some point my mom stepped in and was like, hey, I don't want my daughter to just be drugged up her whole life. So at some point I tried acupuncture. And I have tried different acupuncturists in Utah. The one I liked best, her name was Denise Soretta. And as far as I know, she's not still in practice. I think she got out of practice a long time ago. But I remember going for acupuncture and it felt so relaxing and it helped my anxiety and it just made a huge impression on me. And I was like, yes, like I'm interested in this. But like I said, at that time, I think I was still going to school at Westminster. So it wasn't really on my career path trajectory to do anything with acupuncture. Um, but at some point, lo and behold, I graduated from Westminster. The guy, the guy, the man who is now my ex-husband, I was dating at that time, and he wasn't quite finished with school yet. So I moved up to Portland, Oregon, uh, for a little while. And while I was there, I don't know, I had a hard time getting a job and I was just working retail. And during that time, I was like, why don't I just go back to school? Why don't I just get my master's? And why don't I do it for Chinese medicine? So it was kind of a discovery period. I didn't want to live in Portland, Oregon, because I don't really prefer the weather there. But they have schools there. They have OCOM, Oregon College of Oriental Medicine, and NCNM, National College of Naturopathic Medicine, which also has some sort of acupuncture degree designation. Um, So I got treatment at those schools and I like talked to the students and I was like, this is cool. And then I looked at some schools. I looked at a school in LA and I looked at a school in San Diego. And that's where I went, San Diego. So I lived there for 4 years. And then you know, did all that. And while I'm very much interested in digestive problems, my, I don't know, sort of specialty became related to female infertility. But anyway, that's more than you've probably ever wanted to know about me, my digestive problems. And yeah, so but that's why I got into Chinese medicine.